knowledge and truth is like action in so many ways, right? You have great understanding and knowledge of what the world wants. You also want to get more truth seeking, which I think is a big part of it. But to do that, you have to keep doing that by action, right? Like action produces information, action produces knowledge, which means you ship things, you keep trying things, you ship at an incredible velocity. And then I saw DALL-E do like for the first time, and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. You can now generate this beautiful image in like few seconds, right? The thing I was doing for 6 months, the amount of acceleration that now I saw. And I think something clicking in my mind at that time was like, hey, if you like reduce that marginal cost of like creativity and intelligence and keep scaling, you can just do magical things in the world. If you take that energy, like drive that energy towards something that matters for you and just go chase that, I think it can be incredible.
भाई लोग, आज हमारे साथ बहुत ही स्पेशल गेस्ट हैं, श्यामल। ये ओपन एआई में हमारे साथ काम करते हैं। इन्हें अपनी स्टार्टअप्स करी हैं। ये ओपन एआई में इंजीनियरिंग, काफ़ी सालों से इंजीनियरिंग और एआई बनाते हैं और बहुत सारे एआई नेटिव स्टार्टअप्स के साथ भी इन्होंने काम किया है, बहुत क्लोजली ऑब्जर्व किया है, तो इनके पास काफ़ी नॉलेज है। एंड उससे सबसे बड़ी बात यह है कि बहुत ही हेल्पफुल इंसान है। मैंने देखा है बहुत जो भी स्टार्टअप फाउंडर आके हेल्प मांगता है, ये काफ़ी अबव एंड बियॉन्ड जाके हेल्प करते हैं। तो जनरल एटीट्यूड यही है कि देर बहुत सारे लोग और भी सक्सेसफुल हों। अल्टीमेट फाउंडर फ्रेंडली पर्सन है। और तो इसलिए आई एम वेरी एक्साइटेड टू just talk to him about his life journey. I know, Shyamal, you grew up in India, and the only fact that I know about you is that you're somehow related to Cheteshwar Pujara and the cricketer. So anyway, would love to hear more about just, your life in India, your journey to the US, and all the way to OpenAI and to startups. And then we'll just keep prompting you some interesting questions that we have that we think will be useful for everyone to hear.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for the very kind introduction. So yeah, I grew up in a very small city, Gujarat mein. There's a city named Rajkot. I'm sure many, listeners would be sort of familiar with that. It's like very close to Ahmedabad, which kind of everyone knows about. But I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. So, my father had a business, selling coconut oil and building a brand around that. That's almost 50 years old. And, that aspect of like just the family history of entrepreneurship and the fact that that was the only option for anyone in the family, right? Like there's no like you grow up and work at someone. In fact, my grandfather was like completely against what they used to call in India is like service, right? So it was just like, this is the only way. And actually his journey was pretty inspiring for me because my grandfather kind of started selling tea. Like, so, the typical chai wala, that's how he got started. And then built his own business, in commodities over time in real estate. Journey from like 0 to 1 was super exciting to me. My father had the same thing. So I had a very early kind of just curiosity around entrepreneurship. And over time, as I grew up, I think as I did my high school in India as well through kind of 12th grade, as I kind of grew up, I always had this curiosity for technology, science. I remember kind of playing my first computer and messing around like late nights. I learned my first programming language in like 10th grade, which was C++. Fortunately, unfortunately, it's pretty hard. Like looking, I'm like, this is very different from what I'm used to, because I was really pushing for, me and my friend actually were really pushing for having a computer science course in high school at the time, right? But we did not have the right kind of staff and curriculum to like make that happen. And then I switched to kind of IB, which is kind of the national board later. And this was the reason why I like enrolled in the C++ class, which was still pretty new for me. And that was really fascinating. I think like understanding how to build stuff and how to go much deeper, understanding, it was like a game to me, right? In some sense, you go to the second module and it gets much more difficult, and it's sort of like a very good game. So my friends were really into like other sorts of game, like Counter-Strike, etc. Well, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go do the C++ game. And I was actually building games in C++, which was really exciting. And yeah, I did my high school in India and like in Rajkot itself, in this school called SNKTGS, like amazing school. I wrote a research paper in my 12th grade in math. Was really interested in kind of statistics at the time. And I was doing IB, right? As part of IB, you were supposed to write like a 4,000 word research paper. And, people used to do it in biology or business and management because it was sort of easier. And the most difficult subject to do it was in math. I'm like, I'm just going to do it in math. So
But
I
hang
was.
on, hang on. So were you always like, where did this Kida for looking for challenge, or where does that come from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think like, the fascination for like curiosity, like I just like, I'm a deeply curious person, right? So I think I was always fascinated by just like, magnets and the space overall and like just asking a bunch of questions around even like, yeah, very, very small things, right? Like, so I think the deep curiosity and just being able to be like, hey, I just want to do this bigger thing and challenging thing. It's just fun, right? You don't know anything about it, but maybe you have some knowledge about it, but just going very deep and understanding that particular aspect was pretty fascinating. So I think just the deep curiosity and doing something that you've not done before is kind of really exciting. And plus something that has some useful impact, right? Like ultimately the output of that should be much higher than the input in some way. So that was one of the reasons. Yeah.
So you got hooked onto coding very early around high school.
Yeah.
Hey,
And the
one thing I'll say, Elon Musk, he also used to make his own games when he
yes.
was young.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like common thing, like anyone who's coding his own games, his or her own games in early childhood end up doing really well very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fun. And then of course, I found great languages like Java, and I'm like, now I can
Mm.
build, games a little bit easier in Java, but more fun.
Right.
Yeah, anyways, that's a bit, and I did this like math kind of research paper around like, in high school, which was really fascinating. That's why I got this, the phase two was a fascination for math. And so I used to give a lot of Olympiads in high school. Like I would basically I was in eighth, ninth grade, but any Olympiad that would like come around, like math Olympiad and like, science Olympiad, like I did a very, it's just like a series of bunch of those tests because it was like really exciting. There's this funny case when I give a math Olympiad in eighth and ninth grade, and they were like, I got so happy because I was like, after the kind of results, they were like, you're first in the state for this math Olympiad. I'm like, okay, let me actually take a look how many people actually attempted this math Olympiad. Because I was like, okay, wow, I'm first in the state. I can like, say that, wow, this is great. But actually, I solved like just 2 out of like maybe 12 problems. And apparently there were only like 200 or so people attending the state. So not that many. So I was like, okay, this is fine. But not many people were like giving, math Olympiads at that time from Gujarat.
Dude, I couldn't come first in my block, where I lived.
Yeah.
That first in a state is a big deal.
Oh, I did like terrible in some subjects. Like it is just like chemistry, for example. I just didn't like it, which is actually why this is the one reason I didn't do my university in India. Was very weird reason because I did not like chemistry. And when I started preparing for JEE, IITJ, which is kind of the thing that everyone does, I was just like, this has got chemistry, and this is the one thing I hate. So why am I doing this if I really don't like chemistry? Why is the system actually forcing me to do this, right? And then I quickly learned that once you get into JEE or any college in India, you kind of have to like choose your major beforehand, right? And I was like, I actually don't want to do that. It feels pretty weird to just choose what you want to do because I think I've always grew up in the foundation of curiosity, which is I was like, I think I should do this outside of class or whatever, and I'll go do this. Nobody told me that, no, you have to choose this or this, right? So it's kind of a very simple reason, but that's the one reason I was like, and again, like I met a couple of great folks in the States when I first visited, but that was one of the reasons why I did not kind of pursue my college in India and came here. But second reason was, I was again very interested in robotics in high school. So we actually went to this first Lego League in high school, me and like a crack team at school. Some of them I'm still in touch with, did like a first Lego League. And as part of that, one part was this robotics challenge, right? It's very simple. You have to build like a small robot that goes in a maze, and it should avoid all obstacles and like do it faster than any other team. So we won the national championship for that with a really crack team, and then represented India and St. Louis here. And which is where I met just like a lot of kids that were just like deeply curious and just having fun, right? Which is like, okay, this is the place maybe I should like come to at some point,
Right.
to see what it's like. So that was kind of the second reason that I came to States.
So undergrad here, and then during undergrad, you ended up deciding computer science, yeah?
Yeah. Actually, it's weird. I picked my major initially. I was very interested in nuclear engineering.
Hmm.
So I started doing nuclear engineering. It was like really fascinating for me to like be like, okay, I think energy is pretty important in the world, and the trajectory of how we've seen energy creation has directly led to technological growth. And so I was like doing nuclear engineering, but I was like, okay, this is actually, I don't enjoy this. And I did like computer science because I already, had some experience with C++. That again was kind of the natural inclination of going and studying how to like build, but build more deeply. And then ended up doing more computer engineering and computer science, which is why I also like did a bunch of hardware, learned a bit about semiconductors and things like that, transistors, which I did not enjoy too much. Purely enjoyed the software part of it, but still had to kind of do that. So.
And then Shyamal, what was your like plan after undergrad? How were you thinking about? Were you still thinking about like, no, forget the job. I am either just going to
Yeah.
go and do my own thing, or
Yes, I ended up doing a startup in undergrad, actually. This was like in junior year. Me and like a crack team were trying to build sort of like a social discovery based platform. So it was like similar to TikTok before TikTok. So we did not know much about like raising or whatever, but ended up securing pre-seed, seed in undergrad and kind of drove that for like 8 to 9 months kind of thing. So that was like a really good kind of experience in startups. And I ended up like selling parts of that to a social media company, which is still very kind of stealth-ish. But yeah, I think that there was like one thing that was like really, again, good to go and like do something unknown that you've not done before. And, but you did not have all the time to kind of dedicate to it. But yeah, it'd be nice if I had just, gone and like dropped out and done that. But maybe that wasn't the best idea.
So you came close to being our own Zuckerberg from the social media dropout undergrad startup, and this so this company was your first, I would say, like a product that you were building on your own, and then
and ended up making like a bunch of like money too, which is like nice at the time because I was like, okay, now I get to like sell it. And it's like super early exit, but it just wasn't like we could have done it longer and like it would have been fun and stuff like that. But learned a lot. It was so much fun.
And then after that, so you made some money. Now you're also just coming out of undergrad, and now at that time, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so I worked for a couple of years just doing more software engineering. I was there in Grubhub like early days, working on fulfillment stuff. At the time, like food delivery was still pretty huge industry, and I really wanted to kind of like build systems around that. So I started kind of the data science function within that kind of team, like, because I think a lot of people at the time were thinking about problems still in a very, it was like some problems were very good for ML problems, but the team I was on kind of like that expertise. So I was like always fascinated by data science. So I spun up like a data science function there. But I did software engineering for a couple of years. And then after that, I went to like grad school basically to study AI. So I went to Duke in North Carolina, Durham, which is again like a small town, and studied AI for a couple of years, focused on deep learning and so on.
And this was which year now? This is pre Transformers.
2021. Yeah, 2020. It was still like 2021, pretty recent. Like, yeah, mid 2020, I decided that I want to go to my grad school. Yeah.
I see. And then after that, did you join OpenAI straight away, or was there like another startup detour?
Yeah, so there was an interesting incident in my life. Like, it was basically a little bit before Duke, right? Like, I was still figuring out what to do, and COVID hit, right? And COVID was kind of a really tough time for everyone. I ended up like losing my father at the time due to COVID. And so I basically had to go to India, like, within a day or two with just a backpack and like spend, a few months there. But I think like that was like a pretty big sort of event, right? Like, and that changed my perspective in life. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm just going to go build India and like just do it here. But I was still like, you know what? I'm really fascinated by India, fascinated by AI, and I want to go much deeper into it because, I really thought that I think this was the next thing in so many ways, right? It was just so beautiful to think about, humans building intelligence and learning more about our intelligence by doing that actually, which was really fascinating to me. So I was like, so that happened. It was just a bunch of family events. And I then came again for Duke in grad school and just like went super deep into it, right? Like the perspective after, like, it just like is very interesting because again, like that's the worst thing that can happen to anyone in so many ways. But I think like if you take that energy, like drive that energy towards something that matters for you and just go chase that, I think it can be incredible. And I think that was the best thing at the time. And so, yeah, went to Duke, like did a lot of work around, text to image models. So I was really into text to image models at the time using like StyleGAN and some of the prehistoric stuff now. And that's when I got really fascinated by DALL-E and GPT-2 at the time. I was still putting out GPT-2. It's open source, was incredible for even like tagging things and classifying things. And I was into text to image models, which is where DALL-E was really fascinating to me. And I kind of started learning more about OpenAI.
I see. That is like a very touching and kind of a profound period for you. And do you remember like what was like OpenAI just showing up on your radar as just because the GPT-2 and DALL-E were, and you were like, man, I need to go and find out what these guys are up to. And
Yeah.
yeah,
I think, dude, like working on text image models is so much fun. It's, I was working on text image models for like 6 months during that time. At the time, GPUs were available on Google Cloud, wherever you want. There was no like, you can
right.
just go and buy things. So, and then I saw DALL-E 2 like for the first time and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. You can now generate this beautiful image in like few seconds, right? The thing I was doing for 6 months, the amount of acceleration that now I saw. And I think something clicking in my mind at that time was like, hey, if you like reduce that marginal cost of like creativity and intelligence and keep scaling, you can just do magical things in the world.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is one like research lab out of everyone that wants to build AGI and wants to scale intelligence and bring that to life. That's really fascinating. Like there was not many places where, and I looked at, people who work there, of course, like Ilya and, Sam have always been, these inspirational kind of,
Yeah.
for me. And I think that was one of the reasons I was like, okay, I'm just going to go do more of that. And at the time it was like mid 2022-ish. So this was before ChatGPT. So I joined when OpenAI was like probably under 200 people and we were still a research lab, right? We barely had a business at the time.
Right. And I think one of the most important, really, like you saw so many startups come about in that period from inside OpenAI. And I was always curious. I always wanted to ask you this question, which is why I think I'm going to use this time now. Is like, what did you like? You saw some category defining products being built. I think as far as I know, you were also speaking to these companies and somehow you were in their orbit because of the nature of what you were focused on at that time. And I just wonder if you have observations on founders as well as products. I mean, take it in either direction, but there are ways to think about building products in today's age that I'm very curious to always learn from you. And then you could probably tell us about your observations on founders themselves.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I did, when I joined OpenAI, I did a bunch of things, but then I, realized that we're not doing anything for startups much. So I started working with a lot of YC companies, basically. So spun up kind of the startups function and the team at OpenAI very early on, and just enjoyed, being with startups. And I think at the time, API was this incredible business, and I thought startups are just going to adopt AI much faster than enterprises and are going to go figure out what to do with this general technology. And that was one reason I was like, we just have to bet big on this. So I remember working with Cursor from like very early days. They were part of like the Converge Accelerator, and really worked with them, at a time where they were not sure whether they should build like a plugin or an IDE, right? So I think like those were the type of decisions we're like thinking about. And, I was of the mind that like, yeah, we should just, the IDE would be just great. You can like control a lot more of the experience, and, you're limited by what you can do around not just code as like a surface or artifact, but what an IDE does basically. So the functions and actions of an IDE. So spent a bunch of time with like, Cursor, Perplexity, Harvey, Speak, a bunch of these like really amazing companies and founders. And I think, a lot of people like, I think did as well at OpenAI, Ian Hathaway, who like runs the fund, etc., were really invested also in like enabling this full time. But I was kind of doing this startup stuff as a part-time thing to my main job at OpenAI early on, and then quickly turned into this full-time thing. But the pattern I've seen, speaking about Cursor, like I think Aman and Michael are like amazing. Like they're just we were very cracked early on, went super deep on something that really mattered. And they were not like, I think like in some ways they were building this like hardware co-pilot thing before, and quickly realized that, hey, they were not the ideal users for it. So building like an IDE like Cursor would help them self-dock food and keep them hooked. And they were like just obsessive in building a great product that brings a lot of user delight, right? So I remember like they did not do much marketing as well. This was all pretty much organic growth. It's just a very delightful product. When I first started using it, I was like, wow, this changes everything, right? Like and this was the bet. I was like, okay, you know what? The bet in startups makes sense because I've used VS Code and IntelliJ, and they had all these features like autocomplete and tab, but it just didn't work. It was like slow. The experience wasn't delightful, and they were not innovating fast enough at the time, and the pace at which Cursor was innovating was insane. And I'm like, even if they mess up along the way, the speed of iteration and experimentation velocity is crazy high. So some people, I think, just don't realize in this world that like you can just do things, right? You can just do things, you can just build things, you can just try things, and you can keep failing. That's totally okay. But as long as you build something that people love and a product that is delightful, whether you use AI or not AI, I think that's the thing. It should solve a problem that really matters. And these guys are new, right? Like, yes, code is this modality that was one of the earliest use cases, right? Like we had Codex, kind of the before we have the Codex now, right? Like it was a model that was just working really good. But there's still a difference in like when there is a great model intelligence versus when people can actually make a very delightful product out of it. So I think some of these traits were really great to see. I think I also see like great founders just having like great self-awareness, right? They often hire compliments to themselves, right? So if they're really technically obsessed, they would want someone who kind of can know really well how to like, balance between sales and technical complexity, fostering this owner energy teams. And I think being deeply curious, right? You need both the steep learning curve to be a great founder today. You need to go super deep in something that matters for your product, for your users. Because I think like one thing I've noticed with some of these founders who've been doing amazing work and are now building generational companies is that I think a lot of them realize that when you're building a company, of course, you're raising billions of dollars and all of that, but you're putting world's resources towards something, both capital, people, compute, energy. You're taking all these resources and you're channeling it somewhere. And you have to realize that the cumulative output of that energy should be much, much higher, which means you have to move really fast. And momentum is the new mode in some way. If you have to make sure that you're like making the best use out of those resources. And so I think like that core insight is that kind of changes perspective when you're building just a good company versus a generational company. And I think like, you have to be deeply mission obsessed in so many ways, right? Like great founders that I see have built this cult around them in so many ways where they're super passionate about something. They deeply care about the mission. It's like hard to really, you can kind of be intimidated by their confidence and self-belief, right? In so many ways. But this has been the recurring theme across, some of these startups. Even like Sam, I think like you can see some of these traits when you kind of spend time with him, when you speak to him and when you watch him.
I mean, these are all generational companies, obviously. Cursor is the only ID I use now. Even though I'm not a coder, I feel like have you seen that meme where it says you are a full stack developer now?
Yeah.
Like that. That guy's me. As you've seen all these founders, and some have obviously worked out incredibly well, how does your mental model work in terms of something that's working but may not be as valuable when you're channeling these resources towards something big? Because some of the ideas are not that great, and so some of the ideas may just fizzle out quite quickly. Over the past few years, I'm assuming the founder quality has significantly improved. In some ways, I talk to founders and like they are actually only thinking about genuinely valuable things. What have you seen, especially over the past few years, where founders moving from, B2B SaaS, for lack of a better term, to like these actual problems that will help humanity and, also America in building foundational technology?
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I can share a perspective on this. And again, it'd be a bit biased towards Silicon Valley. We're, in a bubble within this bubble. So you kind of see these incredible people just end up in Silicon Valley, not just because of capital, but because of talent, because of the energy here and everything else. That definitely is a big factor, by the way, right? Like, I think like in the grand scheme of things, like YC is not like super old and like created this like, incredible energy in the Valley that like led to these great founders who are thinking beyond just like more short-term kind of things and then thinking in much longer horizons. I think AI was that, AI is like bigger than anything we've seen before, right? But it enables that. Of course, the first big use case is code, right? Which is amazing. It's great for builders and founders. Exactly why? Because the first big use case for AI is code. I think one of the things that changed, I think in at least the past year, is you have these incredible tools that can help you build, which means you can build much faster and the bar to building becomes lower, which means you're getting these people who are like really experts in their field, like mechanical engineering and chemical engineering and, product, that don't know much to code, but like they can actually, using these tools, get much farther, which is actually a very, very great combination, right? If you're really great mechanical engineer and you can build really good product and software to actually solve problems for mechanical engineers, you're unstoppable in so many sense, right? You deeply understand the problem. You've lived through that problem. You know what the right questions to ask are. And also you know how to build, or you can accelerate your building process. I definitely think this is one factor we cannot discuss, right? Like, I don't know if you agree with that, but it's a big part of why also we've been seeing this acceleration. I think like the second thing is, what you mentioned is like, yeah, they try things, some things work out and some things don't. I think, like I mentioned before, I think that the difference between like knowledge and truth is like action in so many ways, right? You have great understanding and knowledge of what the world wants. You also want to get more truth seeking, which I think is a big part of it. But to do that, you have to keep doing that by action, right? Like action produces information, action produces knowledge, which means you ship things, you keep trying things, you ship at an incredible velocity, right? Physics is the only limit in so many ways. And hence, like momentum is the moat, right? If you're not shipping fast enough, you're kind of actually just, that's actually a big risk, I think, like down the line as well. So I think shipping fast enough is how you get to being more truth seeking. And I think like just if, along the way, like a couple of things don't work out and like a couple of things fizzle out, that's fine. But as long as you keep focused on what matters, you focus on the outcome really, really hard and almost hyper optimize in some case for those outcomes, being relentless is the only way. So I think like founders that I've worked with actually have like just exquisitely sensitive to truth. Like otherwise you kind of drown in your own story in so many ways and treat attention as the most valuable capital you have in so many ways.
Mm. Shyamal, I have this, I don't know if you agree with this observation, but before this recent AI boom, the shape of founders that were coming to Silicon Valley and making it very big were people that would, they would basically be very good at, let's say, following Vice's advice of like, go talk to your users. And there is something different about this kind of Harvey Perplexity way. Not that they don't talk to users, but it's just that they do understand the general problem space and they built like a very AI native product fairly quickly that is possible now. And they kind of just take AI seriously more than maybe the incumbent is. And so that sort of results in a more technical founders, more, like these people understand AI very deeply, all the CEOs of these companies, right? But before you would have normally like the CEO and the CTO combo, and like there's something different now than this kind of last 10 years of this B2B SaaS shape of startups than now. I don't know, do you have any thoughts on this, or if I'm maybe just, I don't know, observing a pattern that doesn't exist maybe?
No, I think it makes sense so many ways, right? Like I think if I just like take Aman and Michael from Cursor, the Cursor's team, they're super technical, right? Like they don't have much background in business. Now they're hiring like a lot of, biz ops folks, but they're just super deeply technical, right? Like they want to just build the best product. And to some extent, yes, now they, built a very good consumer product. I don't think if they started with an enterprise product, it would have been probably not a good idea, right? Like they wouldn't be they wouldn't be able to grow this fast, but they built a great product. And I think like just it traded overall. I think it was like they were their own users in so many ways. Harvey is a good example too. I think like they have a lot of good enterprise adoption now. Also, the founders are like super deeply technical. Gabe is of course a lawyer, so he has like domain expertise and he kind of understands the problem really well. Sorry, Winston, my bad. Correction. Like Winston is, Winston from Harvey has been a lawyer, and I think Gabe was a very technical co-founder. So I think like not like if you kind of think about building a business, right? Like you of course need to iterate faster. You need to like understand, talk to users. A lot of foundational things don't change. You're solving a problem for someone, so those are still the same. At the end, you still have to like go to marketing, you have to go sales, like, but how do you do that? What works? How do people change the behavior around like using these products changes a lot, right? So with AI, what happened to enterprises, of course, they saw the wave. Of course, for any incumbent, it's a big risk if they're not willing to do something about AI, right? Like suddenly you see these, CIOs and CEOs kind of seeing a lot of pressure from their board to be like, hey, this is the budget, go deploy for AI. Like we need to do something here. And, they're going to go and talk to a bunch of startups and figure it out. A lot of startups, on the other hand, right? Like it was like, great, this is a new tool. We're going to go build something great with it. Maybe we don't understand this space, but being around great people, like understanding, knowing other great folks, we can figure out the problem really well and go chase that. But I think like every wave has been a collapse in the cost of action in some sense, right? So, and that leads to different kinds of people who can become builders is the fundamental idea. So like, we kind of go back, like labor kind of moved from this pulling plows to like coordinating factories in so many ways, like electrification and all of that value shift from like turning cranks to like, designing these like systems at scale. And now I think like it's, each time it wasn't just we made existing tasks cheaper for builders who want to build. We repriced labor markets in so many ways and pushed attention to whatever was scarce in so many ways, right? So scarcity creates this innovation in many ways. And yeah, great technical founders who like understand what it looks like to go, from like what I said, like knowledge to truth and truth to solving problems with building and action. It's super fascinating to see that. I think you can just like get a lot of fast creation cycles And you have a lot of tools today to like go and talk to users. And, in Silicon Valley, at least people are willing to take the risk, right? Like like I said, Silicon Valley is an amazing place because you have this culture that is very different from anywhere else you see in the world. Where even if I call a founder today, like, or he'd be much happy to like talk through what he's planning in the next month or so. Or founders typically call other founders to figure out, hey, what's working, what's not working. It's like this paid forward kind of culture, right? Which is without expecting anything in return, which I think really helps overall this community, which I've not seen this anywhere else. And again, people are willing to be at the very early phase of S curve, right? So when these products just come out, like who is willing to take risk on a new AI product with just like two very young founders? But there's something about Silicon Valley, which is like even big enterprises you see today are willing to take risk on startups to solve a particular problem really, really well, right? And so that is really, really kind of amazing to see. And in so many ways, I think like there's this acceptance to risk taking, right? For new generation builders in so many ways, right? Like of course, I grew up in India, and everyone's like, okay, you have to do something stable after like college and go take a job. But now I think over time, builders I see, founders are like very risk taking among like a previously, conservative elite demographic and ex-corporate high achievers or talented hackers or, prestigious university grads. I think like having that risk appetite to go build and the craftsmanship of building because of being in this place, working with the best people on some of the best problems and knowing that you can just do things and things will kind of work out is kind of very different for this, I think, upcoming generation of builders, which they're much more highly likely to take risk, and the society, I think, like really enables them to, like the infrastructure that we have today, the everything that's built on top of SaaS that we have today, it's great, right? So I think like that's my short perspective. Yeah, very curious to hear your thoughts as well, Abhijit.
I 100% agree with you with everything you're saying. I think I don't have still like a crystallized point of view on simply because I think all the traits that you're mentioning, all the like they are just another way to say it is like I feel like something new is happening and I don't know exactly how to capture it. So that's why I hence that was the question behind the question, is that I'm also just collecting observations from the people that I regard and respect their views and are smart. And of course, in your case, no more. I want to, just to be conscious of time, I want to shift gear to one important thing that's on my mind too, Shyamal. And feel free to take it again, however, in whichever direction you think. But what is your general view, whether it could be in the form of an advice or your general view about startup scene in India? As far as I know, one of the first introductions to you that somebody made in the company was like, they were like, please meet Shyamal. They said he's like the most popular like amongst startups in India. But you were very popular, I think, in the tour that you did also with Sam and of India. And I just wonder if you're still connected to the scene there, if you talk to founders there. Do you notice like differences? Do you have advice on things? Just take it however you want.
Yeah, I think like, I'm super bullish on AI adoption in India overall, like India being this like global GDP. And I think as much as possible, I want to help out, just great founders coming from India in any way possible. So I helped Composio, which is a great kind of startup who moved here recently. Smallest AI I've been connected with, they've been building a foundational voice model. Few folks from Servum I'm connected with and helping them out. Portkey was like a very early startup in India that's building kind of the AI gateway, similar to kind of Open Router. So I've been helping that out. And, wherever they're in SF, if I go back to India, I'll just like spend some time with them, right? Like go for a walk, like see how they're thinking about building this and help just solve some of the bigger challenges and problems if I get the time and capacity to do that. So I think overall, I'm super just excited about seeing more builders and founders and startups, generational startups coming from India. And I think like one interesting shift that I'm seeing in India, and one advice that I also give in so many ways, is India should like build on top of the inclusiveness that it has in so many ways. We're seeing incredible talent in India. The digital public infrastructure, the DPI, like shows that what happens when openness is this design feature, right? Like of a system from the beginning. Like Aadhaar is a great example of the open identity framework, which is a great case study for the entire world. The UPI built as this, financial network has become in so many ways like world's like best used payment systems, right? Like processes, I don't know, like billions of transactions. And so I think India has this like nature of inclusiveness and this new digital public infrastructure that I think is great for founders to leverage and build. And I think the new sort of AI infrastructure and testbeds that I think, they've been talking about will enable startups to like really, even train models at much lower costs and address the data sovereignty. So I think like India should win in the application layer, of course, like get the infrastructure up and running for AI for the next decade. Really believe in this like fast iteration cycle and building on top of TPI. But I think we have incredible talent in India. I think like education still is, needs a lot to kind of actually fix and improve in so many ways. Like I think we need to get more people like deeply curious and find a way to like although also connect them to the valley in some way, right? Like bridging the US India GTM gap has been sort of really challenging for a lot of founders. And so I think like that should happen. India has been like in the tech side, of course, been big on services. I think the shift is happening from services to IP creation. And in AI penetration, I was reading it somewhere, India is like probably number one AI skill penetration. Like for both Anthropic and OpenAI, I think India is the second fastest growing market. We're seeing a lot of, of course, India has now an office in Delhi, right? Anthropic, I just heard they're opening an office. I think how India deploys AI across healthcare, agriculture, manufacturing for over 1 billion people will just be so much essential in shaping the future of India and AI and new builders. So I think like it's never been a better time to build in India, right? Like you can build much faster with the tools that you have available. And there's just now, I think like will be incredible talent come back to India in the next few years is my take.
Do you think these the shape of startups that could be built in India is just fundamentally different from like could Cursor have been built in India?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, actually. I don't know. I mean, I'm seeing really great startups coming from India, but it's hard to like answer if Cursor could have been built in India. I do think like I think earlier, like yeah, I think it's less about just like getting access to the capital, but I think like access to talent is very important. And like I think Cursor really got that in Silicon Valley. I think they have incredible people now kind of in the team that have been like really pushing the frontier. But I don't see why not. If anybody dreams of it, it should happen, I think. And I'm seeing like Emergent is coming out of India doing amazing stuff. Cause like Compose, you guys have been doing great stuff. There's Grow, there's like Zerodha, all of these like great startups, Swiggy, I think like there's just a lot of latent talent. And I think it should happen in so many ways, right? Like talent will be, harder to address, but I don't see a reason why people shouldn't like stop dreaming and make it happen.
Right. By the way, shout out to Emergent. I think Madhav was with me at Zenefits. And then I think Mukund was your roommate, right, Rohit?
Yeah, Mukund was my roommate at Columbia. So Emergent, that's how we know Emergent founders. Yeah. The fun fact here, like from that apartment, 6 startups have come out. Columbia University. Yeah. So, because me and my co-founder, we were both roommates. The guy who started Stilt with me. Then there was this guy, Rohit Sethi. He started a couple of companies, actually in image generation or image editing using machine learning or something. And then that didn't work out, but he sold to Apple or like went to work at Apple. Then another guy was one of the founding team members or early employees at a company called Epsagon that sold to Harness, I thought, that sold to Cisco, so on and so forth. And then Mukund started Dunzo in India first, then started Emergent. And then Priyank and I had started like other companies. So total like about 6 startups have come out of that apartment. Awesome. And I'm quite sure like more companies will come out given how some other folks are doing. Yeah.
Right. I think that's God. I think like India is generating like also like, just large volumes of data. I think people are so willing to adopt AI, like especially in the consumer side. It's been incredible to see, right? People just want to try different tools. And, I think the amount of data and, reward signals you can get from these data is like immense. I think the engineering ecosystem is maturing over time. That's fascinating to hear. Yeah. I think there's incredible talent in Bangalore too, right? Like, which is kind of this valley for India in so many ways. Yeah. I think like, of course, regulation will start to like kind of move much faster and hopefully like unblock some of these builders who just want to go do stuff. I think that'll be great. And as much as possible, I think kind of take leverage of this huge domestic market with like so much language diversity, income strata, like urban and rural divides. There's so much to build there.
There are two things sometimes. So as soon as any new technology comes out, I try it with my mom, and I see her reaction. And the only 2 technologies that she like was really amazed by and adopted, one was the iPhone. Because she could FaceTime me, and the second was actually this language translation feature. When ChatGPT added, you can translate one language to the other, because she doesn't feel comfortable in English and she doesn't speak English. So whenever she visits me, she always feels very conscious that she's not able to speak English. And then I showed her how she can translate it to English, and she was super fascinated by it. So I think if she's fascinated by AI and is willing to adopt it, then the rest of India is going to be quite fast. That's one. The second thing I see, this is my, my cousins, nieces, nephews, and stuff. You touched upon the being deeply curious and having the resources to answer your to satisfy your curiosity. I think that is now available to everyone in WhatsApp, in with these AI models. Earlier there were like limited books, or you have to go to the internet. Now that through mobile phone they can satisfy their curiosity and learn a lot more. So I'm seeing younger nieces and nephews being a lot more knowledgeable about global things a lot earlier than at least I
Yeah,
was. I had no
100%.
knowledge. So
And I think this struck me. I missed this, but I think if you just plot a chart of like the number of open source projects in the past 10 years, incredible growth. Maybe you should like put a chart in the podcast of like
Sure.
from 2000 to like 2025, the number of open source projects. Like Cursor was built on VS Code, right?
Right.
It was a clone of VS Code. So just think how much the open source ecosystem has contributed to actually builders just able to build faster, right? If anyone wants to build a design clone or a Figma clone and AI enable it, you can do it easily. It's just because of open source, right? Like I think what was different, I think like even 10 or 15 years back, is not many people were actually open sourcing great stuff, right? Like everything is getting commoditized now, but still companies like big tech was still, very much keeping things proprietary, like IP, and there was just like not much kind of action. So I think that's one other reason why I think this time it's a bit different. Now you're seeing open source models, which you've already seen how much innovation that has led in both China and the US and India, like with OpenAI and DeepSeek releasing open source models. I think both open source software, open source models, infrastructure will enable, I think, is enabling, the next set of decade in so many ways, which is kind of different.
Right. I would love for more and more, here people call hard tech, but they're just tech products and to come out of India. It is a different way to think about a startup or a problem where they may not be a very direct user that you could start using in 3 months, but you're solving an important tech problem. And a lot of interesting stuff that Silicon Valley benefits from does come from people pushing that particular type of startup, right? So where even like Elon's companies or whatever, if you look at them, they're pushing tech forward. And I think India definitely needs all these products and services for users, 100% that's needed. But I think we need to be sort of more encouraging for some hard tech bets to be taken there.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's been, incredible to see just, again, Elon is a great example of this, always, trying to push humanity forward in so many ways. Like we just need to see more like space tech companies in India, more drone companies, like more defense companies. I think like people like trying to explore the oceans or,
Right.
building, kind of trying to get to Mars. I think, the deep tech will hope to see more of that in the next decade, hopefully, with more builders spending in that space. I think quantum computing is going to be, I think, even interesting thing to like really explore. So yeah, need to create like, I think, more infrastructure and also enable people to build like deep tech products, humanoids, robots.
Cool. I think, yes, Rohit, please.
Yes, I have a quick detour or question I've been wanting to ask, and for that I will share Shamal's essay first, and then I'll ask a question on that. So I saw that you wrote this essay called "The Age of the Agent Spec," and you've touched on building things a couple of times. So I'd encourage people to go read this essay that we are referencing here, and we'll add it to the show notes. But also in this very detailed and long essay, you mentioned that, which you've also mentioned in the podcast, is their barrier to building has reduced, and now taste is the true bottleneck of in an era of like endless AI possibilities. Given that you see a lot of startups and work with a lot of people, how does this taste either manifest in building new products, or how does one develop taste in building new products?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like one is really, articulating and communicating like what matters, like why should something exist in the first place and why. Like you're building a product and or a system, like why should that exist in the world now, or in 5 years towards the vision that you're building it for. So if you have that great understanding, of why you're building in the first place and what are you building, I think you start to develop taste. I think of course, you talk to a lot of users. You need to be power user of your own product to understand what great looks like. You will then, in so many ways, you're thinking about it like every day, like, and kind of just immersing yourself in, building the product and people around you who are using it. I think like that is one big part of just developing really good insight into what great looks like, what hasn't worked so far, right? Like, I think reflecting on also like what are the experiments that haven't worked so far and why is super, super important. And I think like as you think about like the barrier to building becomes, a barrier to building goes down over time, taste and verification, right? Like of like verifying what good looks like kind of start eclipsing this like raw implementation skills in so many ways. You can build things much faster, you can prototype much faster, which is going to happen, right? We're going to get to models that'll able to prototype front back end product, like, databases, and launch your SaaS app in like within 3-4 hours. Like, we're not far from that world. So what matters then? Like, great design, great UX is part of that taste. Interactivity, like how do humans actually interact with such a system to make it useful? That is good taste. Reviewing like AI's outputs and ultimately what AI agents are, the kind of work they're doing for you. I think you ultimately need to be able to verify and understand, by understanding like very deeply on how agents are actually building your system over time as things just become towards this automated software engineer. And you need to be able to write tests kind of for agents in so many ways, right? Or evals in so many ways. So I think when you do that, you actually are like, oh, great. Now I need to be much more, I shouldn't just know the implementation logic to some extent. I kind of trust this little algorithm that the agent wrote for me for my product, but I should understand like really well how that integrates with the rest of the interface and how do actually users use it, right? So the new failure modes are pretty different in that world, right? But I think that is one big part of where taste comes from, right? And there's never again a replacement from talking deeply to users, right? It'll give you much deeper insight if you spend time with the power users of your product, and also the users who've tried your product many times but still ended up churning because it was a great problem for them. They came back and now they left for some reason. It just didn't work for them all those times. So I think that's a big part of like redeveloping the taste. Like, I think the UX becomes really important in understanding like the user behavior, how they interact with the product, what actually solves for them. Super important.
Right. Rohit, I want to say something that is underrated and not well widely known about Shyamal, and also to our 73 listeners, is that he's a very good writer. I mean, internally, I read like some doc, and then like me and my colleagues like spoke for 2 hours afterwards about like something he wrote because it was just articulated so well. So anyway, I just can't recommend Shyamal's blog enough to everyone. He's a phenomenal thinker and writer.
Awesome. We
That,
plugged in one. I'm sure there are others. I read two: The Age of the Agent Orchestrator and Age of the Agent Spec. So I can't wait to read the remaining. And I had actually a lot of questions on those, but we could go on for hours if I continue to ask questions on those things. So
yeah.
Yeah, Shyamal,
Yep.
I want to be respectful.
Doc Spinner is pretty good. I feel like people should read that. It's kind of like it's sort of happening, right? Like we're realizing as agents get much more better at things that we know. What is the scarce thing, right? And you just end up becoming this agent orchestrator. You have access to a lot of compute, you have access to these agents, and you wake up and monitor them, you check their work and review their outputs. So I think in a lot of ways we're already seeing that, which is kind of fascinating to see.
go ahead, Abhijit.
Then I was saying just to do the time check because I know it's been like an hour. Shyamal, if you're okay, Rohit, do you have some question you want to ask?
The second thing I had a question on, and this is actually out of my curiosity around using evals versus RL, reinforcement learning methods of building models. And then what is the difference? How should like new founders building and using models think about this? And where do you think that all of this is going? Is it going to be RL based or is it going to be more eval based?
Yeah. And this is in context of building models or also.
Yeah, either building models or using models. As founders
Yeah.
are also trying to fine tune models
Yeah.
for their startups. How should they think about it?
I think test time compute is this incredible thing, right? Like the reasoning paradigm it's just over a year old now, but the element of like giving a very difficult problem to a model and it can think for a long time and you can decide how much compute you want to give it is just incredible insight that you can use for a lot of very interesting problems that either you're solving or you're helping others solve in so many ways through your product. And so I think again, agents don't really have a concept of time if you think about it, right? Like again, you can like paralyze all that compute and like you can still, get back a very good response, with more compute. But I think that we're just at the beginning of seeing like RL is like amazing. It works, right? If you kind of look at the bitter lesson in so many ways. A great essay, by the way, folks should read it by Richard Sutton, who's kind of this godfather of RL. I'm not sure if you guys have read the bitter lesson. Abhijit has.
Yeah.
And
I also saw the Dwarkesh pod
a
last.
second thing I
Yeah.
recommend reading is Era of Experience, right, which was a recent essay as well by Richard Sutton and David Silver. David Silver is the guy behind AlphaGo. So I think like founders should pay close attention to how RL can scale, like help us scale in these domains in so many ways. Evals are ultimately, if you think about it, right, the basic way of explaining it is like test for what an agent does, right? You have a really good specification or spec, what you want your workflow, what you want your task to do. In some way, you also have how do you grade the solution, right? And once you can develop, or at least where we're headed is once you can develop a very good specification, a very good eval in so many ways, and you have a good environment for an agent to interact with, and you scale RL with a lot of compute, that is incredible. Like all of those things will help us scale in that particular domain and or go very deep in solving some of the most difficult problems humanity has come across and will produce. I think like RL again is incredible in terms of where we're seeing research going. Like the era of experience is definitely true in so many ways. And I think now we're at a point where models are getting good at doing long horizon tasks, right? So things that could take humans 30 hours, 50 hours, etc. Right? Like, and you kind of already seen that with like folks using Codex and other, AI agents, coding agents to see like how much longer can they do a particular difficult problem, right? Or a large refactor that would take a team potentially the whole week. So I think that you can do with scaling RL over time. And by actually making sure that agents have the guardrails around them, agents know what the goal is, right? There's always this trade-off between exploration and exploitation in RL. There's on policy and off policy RL. So in so many ways, I think, being able to explore enough to go pretty wide and solve this recall problem and going much deep and solving this precision problem in any domain really helps. So I think like deep RL in so many ways, we're just starting to see, what we're supposed to do. And you can kind of look at this test and compute graph as well, right? In so many ways, like where, pre-training is again great. It's very important to have a strong prior, but RL is this nice cherry on the cake. But we'll see increasingly amounts of compute being just used in for RL in so many ways. So I think that's one trend to like pay attention to. And I think like having a good RL environment really helps because then you give the agent this environment that could be your Slack, or that could be, your Jira, right? Like you have IDE is a great constrained environment. Spreadsheet is a great constrained environment, RL environment. And I think once you have that and you have an eval of what good looks like, that's pretty much all you need. Yeah.
Nice. That's Shyamal dropping a ton of alpha just now. Okay, Shyamal, this is my last question. What is your favorite Indian restaurant in Bay Area?
Oh, boy. Yeah, I like Copra actually. Copra is pretty good. I haven't found like too many great restaurants in Bay Area, by the way. Like South Bay has some good. It's like Zareen's is pretty good. Like I've gone to Zareen's once. I really liked it. And San Francisco, it's like really hard to find. I also like Rue, I think. But I would say Copra is probably up there.
I see. Copra, brain Copra. And okay, Shyamal, again, I cannot thank you enough for spending your weekend evening with us. And again, this is hopefully people listen and take away and builders can benefit from all your views. But yeah, personally, I just want to thank you for coming and being so nice.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully you guys 10x your 100x our viewers after this.
that is that is the hope. That is the I think that's going to happen. I really enjoyed just learning about your work with startups, particularly. I mean, I got to read the essays, and when Abhijit told me we're going to have a deep AI researcher, then I started reading essays, started learning more about stuff, and obviously you explaining a few things here was definitely helpful. I think people will find a lot of value in it, especially people because this is the first episode we're doing in English. So
wow.
I think yeah, so that'll be I think amazing for folks to listen to.
Cool. Well, you can use our models to translate to Hindi.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, and did that on Spotify. It's actually pretty good. You can use the like ASR real time pipeline to actually transfer to Hindi. It'll actually be in the same voice. You can clone our voices and actually do that.
Okay.
We'll apply all AI tech to this episode. That'd be amazing.
Yeah.
All right, but thanks for coming on and spending more than an hour with us.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, yeah.